So excellent. Welcome officially. We've got nearly 150 people on the session this afternoon, which is fantastic. Shows how much this topic is on everyone's minds. So welcome to Think Productive's monthly free training session. Hosting today is myself, Lee Kosher. I'm one of the Think Productive Productivity Ninjas. With me is my colleague, Grace Marshall, as well. And we're going to spend the next little while thinking about how to make hybrid working really work. I suspect many of you might be returning as part of our series of monthly sessions, but if you're completely new to Think Productive, either to this live event or you're watching this back on the YouTubes later, Think Productive is a UK-founded training and coaching company. We've been going for about 12 years now, and we help all sorts of organizations and their people across lots of different work sectors and settings do two things. Clearly, one of them is productivity. The clue's in the name of the company, of the trainers, and indeed quite a few of our workshops. Lots of potential definitions of productivity, but one I like to start with is how can we help ourselves and each other get our very best work done? However, and it's a really important however, we're really interested in that other thing that goes in with our efforts to get our stuff done. And that other thing sometimes has different names. You might call it well-being, work-life balance. Sometimes in the quieter thoughts in the back of our head, we call it having a life. And all of our training is very much at the intersection of those two things. What we're sharing with you today are just some little nuggets and some selected ideas from 3 of our workshops that, as you can imagine, have been quite relevant over the last couple of years, which are around this remote working, hybrid working kind of thing. So for the individual hybrid worker, we got the Productivity Ninjas Guide to Hybrid Working, thinking a little bit more about how things are now different for supervisors, leaders, managers. We've got leading hybrid teams, and really sort of pressing in on the comms and culture kind of thing. We've got a session called Supercharge Your Team Comms. So some little insights from each of those 3 workshops, hopefully to whet your appetite, but more importantly, to give you some good stuff that you can actually start using, even if this short 45-minute session. Here's the structure for today. We're going to start off by just kind of regrouping around where we are now. Then we're going to look at a model from our hybrid working workshop called Getting Good Work Done, our 4 modes model, which we hope will be useful to and relevant to absolutely everybody, no matter what kind of role or circumstance you're in. And then in the latter part of the workshop, I want to sort of widen our discussion to some of the sort of cultural and community and inclusion aspects that have been kind of really on people's minds over the last couple of years. So we'll be looking at things like well-being and lifestyle, connection and inclusion, and starting to think about how those both might manifest and be kind of looking forward to the future workplace that we're now moving towards as well. So this next slide, I actually gave people an invitation to start with some of this even before we started the session formally. But if you haven't put something in the chat yet, I'd love you to just now go to the group chat and check that you're sending to all of us, maybe the answer to just one of these questions. With nearly 200 people on the workshop, even if just each of you puts one of these in, we should get lots and lots of things coming in. What have you loved about working from home? What have you not been so keen on about the working remotely? Or flipping those questions the other way up, what have you missed about the office? Or what have you not missed about the office? And I can already see a really good selection of things coming in. And what's interesting is that there have been good things and there have been not so good things. And everyone seems to probably have experienced, a combination of both of those together. So as those contributions are coming in, I just want to pick out some kind of themes that we've certainly spotted over the last couple of years of working with people. It's been very, very challenging for sure, particularly in the early phase, the first 6 months, the first year. There was a great deal of change, ambiguity, uncertainty, a lot of organizations under stress and having to reinvent, pivot, do things in new ways. And we, of course, experienced that as individuals and households as well. This sort of simultaneous feeling of both over-connection, perhaps digitally, but also disconnection in terms of physical and social connection with our colleagues, and maybe even customers as well. Both of those have kind of manifested themselves in this sort of feeling of work-life blur. Like there doesn't seem to be a separation between those two anymore. And also there's been some quite subtle, but some also quite deep effects on our sort of feeling of connection with our colleagues and our teams, the relationships, the dynamics. And there's been some interesting stuff that's been quite difficult around the amount of flexibility that people have needed in different parts of the pandemic, and the challenge of keeping everyone in contact and included and feeling involved as well. There's been a feeling of like we've been sort of alone and apart. But there have also been the opportunities as well. So a lot of that sort of change and ambiguity and challenge has meant that a lot of us have been suddenly gifted with a lot more empowerment and trust. Decision making has been delegated to where the action is happening. A lot of us have really enjoyed maybe less travel, if that was a significant component of our work before. And many people are reporting that despite the difficulties, they have been able to kind of re-engineer their lifestyle, their life pattern, and there are things about that they are very pleased about. And you'll notice the last two on this bullet point list are actually the same two as the previous slide of challenges. Again, some groups we've been working with are reporting that there has been a new enhanced opportunity to connect with and between teams and team members as well, and that relationships have kind of developed and enhanced in new ways. And at the same time, there's been a great kind of new opportunity for flexibility and inclusion as well, something that we're going to talk about particularly in the latter part of the session. But the one thing's for sure, it's been a lot of change. I particularly love this quote from a few months ago. We're still searching for the exact attribute. Whoever said this kind of really, really hit it, which is that something profound has changed. And even the language we use to describe what we're doing now, working from home doesn't quite fit it. But most people have said, I've quite liked some of it. And I want it to continue. So I think we're at the point now where teams and organizations are really starting to move to like, what is the longer term future? And I know a lot of leadership teams are talking and thinking about, policy changes. What are we going to be doing as we're going further into the future? And particularly recognizing, we've done well, we've kind of fine-tuned things, we're getting there, but there are still some things that we need to address in terms of the most successful form of hybrid working that we could imagine. And the opportunity is therefore still there to continue these conversations, to test the old assumptions, to create new rules and break old ones around what it means to get good work done, and how and where and in what ways those kind of things get done as well. What we're really talking about now, I think, is making this transition from the remote working, the hybrid working being like something we didn't plan and never quite expected, and being a wave that hit us, and really taking that into being like the water we swim in, perhaps for the long term as well. Grace, the chat was scurrying past there as well. Is there anything particularly you spotted that you'd just like to share or amplify?
Yeah, lots of different things. Particularly, I think a lot of people have missed that ability to have those side conversations, to pick things up by osmosis, maybe to develop relationships. There's definitely a lot of resonance with that, but also a lot of appreciation for being able to choose the flexibility of where and when we work, and be able to like actually have the trust to be able to choose that.
Fantastic. And I'm glad that the chat was kind of reflecting what I was trying to pitch there, was that it's been hard, but also we have found some good things in the middle of the difficulty, and it's about trying to preserve those to wherever we go next as well. So the next thing I want to share is again a kind of a nugget, a model from our Productivity Ninjas Guide to Hybrid Working that we think will hopefully be relevant to all of you, whether you're an individual worker, a team member, a leader, a supervisor, or you're thinking about the hybrid working mix at a kind of more strategic level. And this is our 4 modes of work model. Now we're going to gallop through this at some pace because it's a short taster session today. This is something that we go into in a lot more depth, and we use almost as a sort of troubleshooting model on that workshop. But the idea is that even in the before times, even if we didn't realize it, each of us tended to work in 4 different modes. So what we're doing in this model is recognizing those modes in a clearer way and also naming them. And you can also see that the modes are distinguished by whether or not we're doing work on our own that just involves us, or whether we're doing that work in cooperation with other people. And also across the top, it's depending on whether that work is done kind of asynchronously or synchronously. Am I doing it at a time I choose, or am I having to do it simultaneously at the same time as other people? So I just want to say a few things about each of these 4 modes and just give you an opportunity to kind of think about how are each of those modes going for me, and maybe think about some changes that you might want to make to each of your experience of those 4 modes. And again, please do put in the chat any of your observations about this as we go along. So the first one is solo mode. This is you doing your own thing that only you're involved in this bit of it, and you're doing it asynchronously. You're doing it in your own time. Solo work is about the things where the creation, the deciding, the planning, the writing, the scoping, the imagining, like a lot of really high value work happens in solo mode. And despite that, a lot of people say that's the hardest mode to get into. Like the battle for good, deep work in solo mode is really the battle for protecting your attention, your focus, your flow, for getting away from distraction and interruption. And as soon as that flow is broken, getting back into the groove is really, really difficult. The other thing that makes solo mode work tricky sometimes is this interesting tension between flit and focus. So in quite a few of our workshops, we talk about the difference between multitasking and monotasking. And in general, the conversation is like, multitasking is really tempting, and I find myself doing it. But actually monotasking seems a lot more effective and also feels a lot better as well. So if you're finding solo mode, either you're not getting enough of it, or you're finding it difficult to keep in the zone, then really we would invite you to fully deploy the productivity ninja characteristic of stealth and camouflage. So it comes in lots of different flavors. There's physical stealth and camouflage that we used to talk about a lot when we did work in shared spaces, but has still been needed when we've been working in the household spaces as well. And particularly one that's really, really relevant is your digital stealth and camouflage. How you're protecting your bubble from the onslaught of all the pings, the dings, and the bells and the whistles and things like that as well. And maybe even it's about designing particular parts of your day or particular parts of your week where you can get some really good high value solo mode work going. Next one is tandem mode. Tandem mode is where you're still working on your own stuff, but you're doing it at the same time and crucially in the presence of another person, or maybe even a couple of other people. And this is one that maybe you didn't really realize you were doing quite a lot. You know, you used to go to the office and you had your desk buddy and you'd be doing your own things, like my colleagues Cara and Jess there in the bottom corner. But there'd still be this feeling of connection and interaction and support and accountability. And there was something about the atmosphere that working alongside somebody gave. So quite a lot of us have missed that, the sort of office buddy, desk buddy thing as well. So again, thinking about really practical ways to bring that back, perhaps through the virtual technology. So we've been doing Wednesday Wormhole in Think Productive, where we actually just all get on a Zoom and we're all still doing our thing, but we kind of check in and say hello to people. And it's the opportunity to kind of replace some of that office vibe that we used to experience before. It can be really good for motivation, for presence, for connection, for maintaining relationships, for just that kind of like, what do you think of this? Or, you know, second opinion kind of stuff as well. And I can see Helen there going, oh yeah, tandem mode. I didn't even know it was a thing and it had a name, but now I'm realizing that's the one that I'm really, really missing as well. Now we're rattling through these 4 modes at some pace. There's lots more that we have to say about helping people with each one, but I want to give you an overview of all 4. So tag mode is where it's not just the thing you're working on. You are working on it in cooperation and concert with other people. But that cooperation is done asynchronously. So it's not like live simultaneous work with other people. And of course, this is traditionally done by flinging messages to each other. But boy, if it was bad before in our notifications and our inboxes, like particularly in the first 6 months to the year, it suddenly got even worse with the confusion. You know, we threw up a lot of platforms and systems very quickly to try and replace the in-person contact, tools that we weren't so familiar with, maybe an over proliferation of platforms and tools. And that's become overwhelming. And it's actually been therefore quite difficult to get this good, effective tag working going, where we need to exchange messages and information about the different moving parts of a task that we're trying to work on together. And you get this kind of simultaneous feeling of like, I just can't get any peace, but also I can't get back any responses that I need to move my next little bit down the board. So this comm overload thing is getting in the way of lots and lots of things around well-being and team culture, but also particularly the tag working has become very difficult. So specifically on our Supercharge Your Virtual Meetings workshop, we're really encouraging teams to go back and revisit things like, which tools are we using for what? Do we have too many tools? Do we need to retire or calm down some? Do we need to opt out of some? And then particularly, what are our kind of rules of the road about who's in what channel? What notifications are we expected to have on or not? And when is it okay to pull away from those tools as well? Because remember, tag mode is asynchronous. One of the reasons it goes really, really wrong is when you forget that and you think tag mode needs to become fully synchronous. It's not. Team mode is for that. So again, the idea of just making a little bit more visible, or just making a little bit more honest what kind of mode you might be in for a day, and what kind of response protocol you might be operating. And it's okay to just sometimes slow down the hamster wheel of work. And then also, and this is a bit of a wider conversation, maybe the tag doesn't just need to happen in emails or in Teams channels or something like that. And so I have seen, particularly over the last 6 months, teams starting to realize that tag mode is still important, but maybe there's other things that we can do it in more effectively as well, just to take some of the extreme heat out of some of those messaging platforms as well. So again, you drop in the chat if you've started to find yourselves doing tag kind of work in different ways, other than just by that extreme high rate messaging. And then the last mode, and this again is something we talk about in the Supercharger Team Comms workshop, but also in our Fixing Meetings workshop, is the team mode, which is there's several of us working together on a thing, and we're doing it live in the moment together. And there are many, many kinds of work where that there is no substitute for just having people together in real time, and the kind of flexibility and the response and the creativeness that has come from that. And of course, our immediate way of trying to do that in the early part of the last couple of years was we really, really got into virtual meetings in a way and to a depth that we were never expecting. I mean, this applies in our own team. Grace and I have lived inside Zoom for the last couple of years, and it's been interesting. And I think we've all upped our game and our skills. But there's still things to do there in terms of, good meeting practices and good meeting cultures. How can we make, sorry, Grace, go for it.
I think I can safely say we've never seen each other in the bath though.
No, I'm 100% able to confirm that. But, there's this balance, and I can already see things coming in the chat by making use of these virtual meeting technologies for that live cooperative work, but not having them become the overwhelming source of the distraction and the crush on the capacity to do the other modes of work that are really, really important. So let's make meetings rare and special and effective and engaging and fun, but only use them in the situations that we really, really need to use them. And then the last thing about this team working mode is that, of course, now there's another iteration coming. for some of us, this other iteration and evolution has already started. We're starting to go back to the office a bit more. Some people never left the office, depending on the kind of role that you're in. And so we're now starting to find ourselves wrestling with the new and very specific challenges of hybrid meetings. What does it mean to do a good meeting where some people are together in the real and some people are coming in as well on the virtual? And that requires a very, very specific set of techniques and behaviors, and sometimes even technology as well to do well. So Grace, I'm going to ask you in a second to just see what was coming in the chat to end that section, but just a reminder here of the 4 modes. So this is about you doing your own work, or you doing work in cooperation or in the presence of other people, and whether that's happening synchronously or asynchronously. And I invite you to just use that to troubleshoot the sort of different parts of your hybrid working experience, and maybe look for useful changes that you can put in place to enhance each of these. Grace, what was going on in the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think people are, by and large, been happy to be able to choose to create that solo work, but even actually working from home, there are other distractions. So the recognition that we need to use stealth and camouflage in lots of different ways, even when we're working in our own spaces. Tandem one's the one that always splits people. So some people are like, oh, really, really miss that. Other people are like, no, I really, really enjoyed not having So it is one that possibly depends on your personality. The tag and team ones are really interesting. I think one thing that I've noticed that's just come up through on the chat is that actually sometimes teamwork doesn't work because people aren't actually paying attention. So when we've got virtual team meetings, for example, it's hard to see, have we got everyone's full immersion, everyone's full engagement, or are people being distracted? Are they being pulled away by email? Have they switched off? So that can sometimes happen. Sometimes that happens because there's too many meetings, and some of those meetings are actually where we're just updating each other. So maybe that should be more tag rather than team. But sometimes it's just like the team etiquette, the meetings etiquette that needs a bit of work, I think.
Yeah, and I think that the more general point I'd like to just overlay all the top of that is and we're going a little bit more to that space now with the next sections, is everyone's experience of what has happened over the last couple of years has been different, and everyone's kind of challenges and also gifts have been different, and also the techniques people are going to need to use to make this work are going to vary across people as well. I just want to press a little bit more into a couple of areas that have been really, really important to me personally over the last couple of years. And when I say the last couple of years, I don't think any of us imagined exactly how long it was going to go on for. And, it's been quite tough. And I think the other point I want to recognize is that it's been quite tough for everyone, no matter what your personal circumstances or context are. There are so many stories that I hear people say about their last couple of years, and for all of them there's challenge. So you could have been a clinically vulnerable person, perhaps on your own or in a small household, who spent most of the last 2 years feeling very isolated, very disconnected, and have had all of the challenges that have come from that. Or you might have felt that the last 2 years has been 0 moments of ever being on your own. Yeah, so you may have felt overwhelmed, the complete opposite, and you've had the challenges of caring responsibilities, multiple people in the household, home working, perhaps even supporting homeschooling as well. So my always and continuing advice for leaders, for managers, for supervisors, for people setting strategy is recognize that range of contexts and range of stories, and that there will be many, many people in your team whose circumstances have been very different than your own. The other thing about the well-being side is that I think it's really surfaced the importance of that agenda to an extent that maybe it wasn't given before, because we've all found it tough. I think that's allowed us to all say, no, this stuff really does matter. It's not just a buzzword on a corporate website page. It's not a 6th or 7th line priority on an HR policy. It's the thing we really need. So I've been encouraging people, and I've been paying attention more than ever to my own kind of what I call tactical or operational fueling. and realizing the importance of break and sleep and nutrition and exercise, and just knowing when to stop. One of the things that's been so hard about like the work-life blur is that sometimes we found it even harder to stop than when we used to physically move our body out of the office. And that was like the kind of main social signal to say, okay, you've finished now, you're off duty, you're going into the other modes of your life. And then I think the other thing we've encouraged people to really pay attention with is like, where's your deep fuel coming from? You know, there have been times where I felt really, really tired during lockdown, and I've had to say, I need to just, you know, take a break. I need to reprioritize my deep fuel rather than ditching the thing that's just for me, because I've been so giving of myself in work mode, and I've needed to be so giving of myself in partner and parent mode. It's when I start to take my eye off the kind of thing that could otherwise feel like a guilty luxury. It isn't. That I think we all need to be encouraged to bring that stuff back in. So, you know, lots of practical methods that we've seen in lots of different organizations where people have been paying a lot more attention to this, you know, making well-being sharing and check-ins like something that's kind of built in, and therefore becomes like the natural thing to share and ask about, to the extent that you're comfortable. That's also a really important rider as well. And at the same time, recognizing that we're not all superheroes. There will all be times when we're having a bad day, or we're off form, or we've got something else going on. And that isn't something that we should ever feel we need to hide. That's actually something that we can embrace. And then the key idea becomes, how can I help the people around me? Or what help do I need? And feeling okay about asking for that. Grace, give us a 30-second insight into what's been coming in the chat around that section.
Yeah, so in terms of well-being, it's really been a mixed bag. So some people are like, yeah, I love that Nikki shared that they make well-being the very first part of their induction process.
I too love that as well.
But then for other people, it's like, actually, you know, it's been busier, it's been less fun. People have said, feel like, you know, we're not all completely on board this hybrid working. There's still like a bias towards visibility, which yes. I know you're going to be coming on to.
Oh, I'm so coming to that in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I just think that as for leaders, for supervisors, for people setting strategy, like that part of where we've come from and where we're going next is of utmost importance. I've also got a few other things that I'm really passionate about as well in the next section. I've been really watching, not only in our own organization, but all the organizations I've had contact with over the last couple of years, particularly what this situation and what these huge changes have done to connection and inclusion. You know, people are by nature social animals, and the social interactions and connections that were built into the way we worked in the before times suddenly got swept away. And, you know, again, everyone's experiences differ, but like many people are saying, I've missed this bit. I found it hard without that. I wish we could have this again, etc. You know, these sort of pining for the water cooler moments. And again, on lots of the workshops, we talk about and share ways in which people try to bring that back in. Things like, you know, social events virtually, other ways of gathering across teams, virtual coffee roulette, wormholing, many ideas. But I think there's also, as well as just that, there's a few more subtle and deeper things going on that we need to be paying attention to. This idea of proximity bias and micro silos are sort of, our horizon and our moments of connection have reduced. You know, you used to go to the office and you'd see people in reception, and you'd see people in the canteen or in the sandwich shop, or you'd walk through other departments and the floor plan to get to where your little team were. And there'd be these regular encounters that you would have, even if it wasn't the people that you spent most of your day working with. And it gave you kind of just this wider awareness and network within your organization. And there is a danger, if we don't deliberately compensate for it, that our universe sort of collapses a little bit, and we get this idea of proximity bias or micro silos. This is terminologies we've just invented to try and talk about
Okay, I think we've lost Lee.
I'm back.
You're back. Excellent. You're still a little bit choppy, Lee. We heard that you're back, but then we lost you again. So I think Lee's just coming back online. But yeah, absolutely. The joy of virtual meetings. So yeah, Ninja agility is definitely needed here because there are things that we can't plan for. You are just coming back. Your screen sharing's just started.
Yeah.
Let's just fill in the time. There we go.
That's all right. That's good, isn't it? Talking to people who've started anew in an organization and maybe like, what does it mean to create connections, to create community, to learn on the job? All those kind of things are very different. And haven't met all of our colleagues in person as well. So new ways of doing that. I know in our own team, we've started to really up our game with our sort of virtual presence to each other than just talking about the transactions of work. So kudos wall, Truth Tuesday, thanks, Friday Pulse, all sorts of things. Making opportunities to connect virtually aren't just about talking about the work. So the idea of social events and town halls and stuff like that. And also ways of celebrating as well. So we are starting to get new opportunities again for in-person connection as more people come back in person, but there are still things that we can do to kind of compensate and correct for some of the things that we have lost, perhaps. The other thing that has really been on my mind is that there's been a great change, in many ways positively, for lots of people who may have been asking for lots of accessibility or workplace adaptations for maybe many, many years, and then suddenly they were there and they were offered as well. So the ability to have extended or full-time working from home or remote work, or the fact that jobs that previously might have involved a lot of travel now don't, maybe means that different roles within the organizations are available to and open to more people. Virtual meetings seems to have been the opportunity to make meetings more accessible for a lot of people, either have captioning or be able to watch recordings back and things like that. And I really, really want us to hold on to that stuff. And I also am aware that there are people that have therefore had the kind of adaptations that they have been asking for over the last couple of years that might be a little bit nervous about whether or not they're going to be reduced or taken away, or whether they're going to be asked to come back to the workplace more than maybe they would find easy as well. So there's been some great stuff there that I've celebrated. But also I think there was a lot of people that are really going to be wondering, well, what's next and stuff like that. And then the other thing that's been on my mind, and there are two images here that I've tried to encapsulate what I'm talking about, is this phenomena that, again, I've just created the phrase for it, workspace inequality. This is like another way in which the experience of remote working, hybrid working has not been the same across the board. Again, it was something we maybe didn't realize, which was that when we all used to go to the office to work, there was something automatically leveling about the fact that you had the same kind of desk and, you drank from the same tea point, and like maybe some people had an office with a door on, but not many others. And you were given the same kind of chair and the same kind of kit and, roughly speaking, the same kind of environment. That has not been true for the last couple of years. So again, some people literally started lockdown and have done the whole of it with a laptop balanced on an ironing board in a 1-bedroom studio flat. And other people already had the garden shed before lockdown and didn't actually even notice much difference. It was just they were in it 5 days a week rather than 3 days a week. What is the point I'm trying to make with this slide? I'm trying to make 2 points. One, this is still true. And two, we need to do something about it. So I am very pleased to start seeing a lot of organizations now thinking about, like, what can we do to the extent it's possible to try and even up some of this stuff? Do we think about workspace kind of like checklists at home? Do we think about the money that we used to spend on floor plan that maybe now is going to be reduced a bit, to think about what we do to kind of make sure that people have the kit and then the environment that they are working? But it will always be like this, and not all of us have the opportunity to have a separate space or a quiet space to get our stuff done in the household as well. So people who set policy, please remember those two images as the extreme kind of ends of what your people are dealing with as well. And that includes, in terms of where we're going next, this is the last kind of little section that I want to say, is that the future workplace and what it looks like is kind of up for grabs. And many organizations have started this kind of grand experiment, but I think it's really going to be the focus for the next year as we start coming together again in person. Like, maybe not only the places that we come together will start to look different, but what we do when we go there will be different as well. Like, the days where we used to just all physically go to a place, sit in a rank of desks alongside each other and do our own stuff, I think that's pretty much over. Maybe like what we will do when we go to those shared spaces, it's going to be more about the team mode work, the connection, the collaboration, the learning, the sharing, some elements of the community building and stuff like that. And then things like the tandem work and all that kind of tag work will continue to be done in the remote space. So I think a lot of organizations are rethinking what are they going to do with their buildings, their square footage, their floor plan. Obviously, that stuff cannot be changed overnight. A lot of organizations are locked into long-term deals. But I predict that 5 years down the line, what an office looks like and what and how it is used will be very, very different. And I also think that the home working like area will change again. So we moved house 3 times during lockdown, which I do not recommend. So one of the results of that was that I spent a lot of time on Rightmove, and I noticed that listings on Rightmove were changing, and instead of things being described as 3-bedroom house or 2-bedroom flat, it was 1-bedroom flat plus double home office and things like that. I think even developers that are building the smaller studio flats now, or kind of shared occupancy situations, there's going to be a cupboard or a nook that you can kind of set your workstation up in, but you can kind of close it at night or something like that as well. So household design, lifestyle design is going to change as well as we make this kind of stuff permanent. So the grand experiment continues. And, what we've really tried to do for all the organizations we've worked with over the last 2 years, in all its iterations, when it was kind of just the emergency, right, you're all going home. You're going to be working home for a few weeks and we'll muddle through it. And then it became the remote working, and now it's becoming the hybrid working. What we tried to do today is give you a taster of some of the issues that have been on the minds of our clients and some of the things that we're bringing help with as well. Grace, thank you for covering during my small technical glitch, which was wonderful. I'll be interested to see how we cover that in the recording that we're going to post later. What have we missed in the Q&A? We're at the end of the sort of formal part of the session, but we've got at least 5 minutes, possibly more, for some comments and Q&A.
Absolutely, yeah. So keep the questions coming in. I've tried to grab the ones that are coming on the chat that we've not managed to answer, but also if you can pop it into the Q&A bit, that's much easier for us to spot as well. So really interesting comments coming in while you were talking about that kind of sense of connection and inclusion and the workspace inequality. Definitely that image, I think, resonated with a lot of people. Yeah, some really interesting things around accessibility. So people feeling like they can actually recruit from a wider range of people.
Yes.
With the sort of the possibility of remote working. But also actually being able to work from home has been really helpful for some people with mobility issues. Yeah. Because of not having to travel in all the time. But equally, somebody else mentioned that doesn't mean we should take away the mobility, accessibility in offices.
Oh, no, yes.
Give them the choice to be able to come
absolutely. In. So I'm a person with a non-visible disability, and I have found it interesting, like with the change over the last couple of years. I didn't quite realize how sapping and stressful some elements of what my job was like in the before times were until I started to go back to them. But like, I think it is exactly like you say, like this is an opportunity to recruit from a wider talent pool. It's an opportunity for more people to contribute in more ways. But as well as embracing the great things about the increase of remote, like absolutely we must and should and continue to think about accessibility in the physical workspace, particularly if we're about to repurpose and restructure it. So again, I would invite those people who are involved in those kind of decisions to very much have that front of mind. What else have we got?
Okay, so some good questions coming in. What are some unobtrusive ways of monitoring home workers for well-being and productivity? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I thought you were going to say unobtrusive ways of monitoring home workers. And my thing is, don't do that, because there's been some terrifying like screen snipping and shadowing products that threw themselves up in the last 2 years. I think it was like we said, like having the well-being conversation just feel more built in and natural. And there'll be times when somebody doesn't want to share, but if you regular opportunities to share if you wish, that becomes much easier. And that might be in the team collectively. We're quite good at doing that in our team, and it might be in one-to-ones. It might be with other people in your organization that you can reach out to in terms of staff well-being teams or occupational health. It doesn't just have to be line managers doing that as well.
And
What
I'd say
else?
also actually managing, be mindful of what you reward and what you challenge. So if you see someone always sending emails really late at night or on the weekends,
yeah,
just, do you say, hey, well done, look at that person working really hard? Or do you say, hey, what's going on? What's wrong?
Yeah, and model the kind of behavior you would like to reinforce as well. So if you're the senior leader that is sending emails at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, just have a think about what that says to your people. We're getting into stuff we talk about in wider Think Productive work. Let's just do one more, Grace, and then I'll sort of wrap up the formal advertised part of the workshop. So to go and go, but we'll keep going for a bit of after show as well.
Yeah. Okay.
What else?
I'm going to maybe try and amalgamate a couple of, because we've got some really great questions. So I guess this one's more about motivation and engagement. So, there's questions around how do we make hybrid meetings really kind of inclusive, engaging, but also the question of like, how do we generally keep everybody, engaged, especially remote workers? Is it possible to remain connected with your workplace and retain that meaningfulness, even if you're not, like, in the long term, if you're not seeing each other face to face?
So I've been thinking about this over the last couple of days. There is a definite tension in this question, because if you're saying we need community, we need connection, one of the obvious ways of doing that is like, let's do that digitally. But then in the same presentation, I've been saying, you've got too much digital stuff in your life. You need to step back and have a break. So I think it's very carefully chosen moments and methods to get like the maximum community building, but without like adding to the digital onslaught. And then I actually think that when we do start maybe inviting people to come back one day a week, a couple of days a week, whatever it is, I think we just need to really cherish those moments where we're together, both to do the kind of collaborative, synchronous team mode work that is best done when you're together, but also look at that for the opportunities for the community and connection as well. So for instance, we're starting to go back to do in-person training. And actually the L&D booker I talked to said, the main outcome for me for this training, as well as what you're bringing, is the fact they get to spend the day together. So like give them lots of breaks. And if they're late back from the breaks, don't worry, because that's actually part of what I'm trying to get them to do today. And I nodded to that person and I said, I agree, that is very wise. Let's use that day in that particular way as well. We're up to formal time. That doesn't mean we're going to disappear, but what I do need to just do is wrap up formally if anybody is needing to go to the next Zoom. So on screen is Grace and I's contact details. You are very welcome to email us, but if it's in the evening or out of hours, we won't reply in the middle of the night. We're also both tweeting people, so you can find us on Twitter, and you're very, very welcome to reach out to us on LinkedIn as well. So keep in touch with us individually. You can also obviously find out a lot more about us as a company as a whole if this is the first time you've had any contact with us on the website. So that's thinkproductive.co.uk. There you can have a look at everything we do across the whole range of productivity and well-being niches, as well as obviously a little bit more about the 3 sessions that we have tried to give you a little bit of an insight into today. And I love Charlotte's incredibly well-timed question, which is that if you would like to do a little bit more work with us, then either reach out to us about in-house workshops, or there's the opportunity to just try things out as individuals or a couple of people as well. So on our website, there is information about our regular program of public workshops. And also you can continue to indulge in sessions like this. So this is an ongoing series of monthly sessions that we've done throughout the whole of this last 2 years, and we will continue to do so, I pretty much think, forever. And they're usually like today, about 35 minutes of prepared content on a particular topic, and then about 5 or 10 minutes of Q&A. So other than that, you're very welcome to stay, and we'll do a bit more of chat and Q&A up to my hard out at 3 o'clock when a small person arrives home from school. But if you are leaving us now, then thank you very much. And we are very glad that you gave us part of your afternoon. And thank you.
Brilliant.
Do you want to leave the recording going for this? No, let's leave it going for the Q&A. So if you're a YouTube person and you're watching back us on YouTube and you've got this far, then thank you very much. And these are your special Easter eggs, bonus content stuff as well. What else is going on in the chat?
I'm going to throw a question at you about hybrid meetings.
Yeah.
So if you've got some people in the office who are joining a meeting, but some people need to dial in remotely, what's the best way of dealing with that? So I've seen some people saying, let's have everyone huddle around one computer, because then we don't have an echo thing going on, but then it can be quite hard for everyone to be engaged. What do you think?
The main thing I want to say about this is that this is not going to be easy, right? So what I quite liked, and I've heard many people report about the fact that, virtual meetings did make it logistically easier to bring groups of people together. There was a kind of automatic leveling. It changed the social dynamics in meetings in maybe a positive way. Accessibility was better. We need to be careful when we go back to hybrid that we keep everyone included and stuff like that. So like I can see there, Jackie, like, we go into separate rooms. We sort of keep the leveling aspect of purely virtual. If you are going to have some people in the real and then some people virtual, I really liked a contribution I did see earlier, which is about like sometimes the really important stuff in a meeting happens in the fringe, in the break, like out of like here microphone off camera. So I just think some very deliberate design for the person facilitating that meeting to make sure that the experience in the inclusion for the dialing in person is on a level with the in real person. And there are some new techs coming to help with this. So it wasn't a planted thing, but Sarah there has said Meeting Owl, really interesting 360 camera that you put in the middle of the meeting room, and it allows the person who is virtual to effectively look in different directions, so they can kind of actually do an equivalent of looking around the room that they used to do. And it has like voice tech, which will make sure that the attention is shifted to the person that's doing it. They seem great. They're also not cheap. So I'm very, very jealous that your team has one, Sarah, as well. And I love that one there, Emma. Yeah, sat with a colleague during the break for the chat, so that the virtual colleague wasn't just kind of ignored for the tea break and stuff like that. Yeah, little bits of social re-engineering, I think, will really make a difference in hybrid, as well as facilitation skills, and as well as thinking about the best ways of using the tech.
Yeah, I also found out, I remember doing a session once at one of, a workshop for a team that was part of their whole team away day that was virtual. And they started with the first part of the agenda was a walking meeting. So they paired people up within Zoom, asked people to dial in on the first, and asked them to be ready with their winter coats, because it was in the middle of winter, to go outside. And they went for a walk 2 by 2, basically. So they got to have a walking check-in meeting with a colleague for the first, say, 10 minutes. And then it's like everyone come in and dial in.
I like that. And the first couple of times you did that, that needs a lot of planning and a lot of prep. But
Mm.
I could see how that would become, a natural way of starting the meeting and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
yes, I mean, Graham and Haley were writing the How to Fix Meetings book for change, and they very much put a stop on the manuscript and said we need to go back and rewrite this to recognize what's going on with virtual now and with hybrid. And that was published very much thinking about this mixed economy of meetings and stuff like that as well. What else? I'm happy to talk about hybrid meetings more, but there's lots of other ground that we covered.
Yeah, let's look at this one. So how can we successfully challenge higher ups who seem to value presenteeism, even if we can work more successfully and safely from home?
Yeah, I have strong feelings about this. And I think I'm going to say it. I think that any organization that is assuming that we can snap back to exactly what it was like before is, first of all, going to find that very challenging and is going to encounter a lot of resistance. And I also think they're wrong. And I also think they're missing a lot of really good stuff. So lots of things that we've talked about widening your talent pool, allowing people to have new relationships around their work-life balance, recruiting. I think if anyone puts a job advert up right now that says must be done 5 days a week in person in this site, unless you're operating a machine press and the person who's applying knows there's a reason why it has to be done 5 days a week in person, I think that's going to be really, really difficult. So I think we should continue to say, let's recognize all the great things that came in the middle of the challenge, and let's not lose them just because the reflex is to want to go back to what it was before. And I think I'd be happy to sit in a room with any senior person and say, are you really sure about that decision? Can you really justify it? So gosh, I was bold there in my answer, wasn't I?
Absolutely. I knew you'd have some strong opinions about that. So the coach in me wants to ask more questions. Yeah, the coach in me wants to go, okay, tell me more about what you feel being together in the same place gives you. Yeah, that doesn't happen in remote, because actually that's where you can then find out, okay, so as a coach, I've recently been working with a leader who's like, oh no, we definitely like everyone back in, because, and this is a small company, because that's where the culture gets built. It's like, okay, so what are those elements of the culture? And actually talking about it forced this person to start to articulate the things that were more instinctive when everyone's together. And so sometimes it's just, it's actually just getting clarity over what's the work involved here in communicating that more clearly, rather than relying on osmosis. And so sometimes
going back for some periods where we get together connected, and I'm hoping I made that clear. I think there are some things that are just much easier to do in person, but I think they need to be carefully chosen and seen in a sort of mixed economy. We've got our own in-person gathering coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm very, very excited about seeing you all in person, and I know that we will talk a little bit about work and business, but most of what will happen over that couple of days is just reconnecting as a team, spending time together and everything else like that. So there are going to be difficult conversations, but I would push back on any assumption that is 5 days a week in person. I know we're in the after show and the more informal part of the workshop here. But there are still nearly 100 people listening to me say that.
Absolutely. Yeah, the value of that is having the conversation and really get kind of, rather than, oh no, that can't work or that can't happen. That's the instinctive stance, but actually dig a bit deeper. That's what I'm all about. That's why I wrote a book on struggle. It's like, dig a bit deeper. What's the thing there that's either missing or you're not sure about or you're worried about? And let's bring that out into the light and then work on how do we make that work? And sometimes the answer might be, yes, we do need to get together for that. But when you've had that conversation, everyone's bought into the reason why, much more than just forcing it on everyone else.
And I don't want to not recognize Pam's comment in the chat there, which is that there might be some people who saying, no, I need to continue to have full-time remote. Let's have a conversation with that person and find out why that is so important to them. Is it about accessibility? Is it about disability? Is it about lifestyle? Is it about circumstances? Is it about context? If somebody's very clear about that, there will be reasons. And maybe if in ways recognizing and honoring those reasons, but also get some period of the in-person connection coming back in as well. Go for it.
I kind of want to give a little bit of a shout out to one of our public workshops coming up that Hayley's running on 4 tendencies.
Go for it.
So one of the things that you just mentioned there is actually when we have a discussion to talk about why, then people buy into that more. That's actually one of those 4 tendencies. If you're a questioner, you are someone who actually will only do things when you know the reason why. So that might also be a really useful thing to go to from a team dynamics perspective. If you feel like there's maybe some differences in your team, some people are a bit more resistant, some people are really bought in, then maybe looking into that 4 tendencies and where that where your split is between you amongst the team, that might help give you some ideas for better relationships, but also better productivity, setting habits, working well together. So little plug there, and Elena's popped the details in the chat for you as well.
And then maybe the last thing I'll say on this one, and then maybe we'll get time for one more theme or one more exploration before we need to do the hard out. Like Jackie said, what happens if their job description requires them to be there, but they still refuse? I would again go back to saying, why does their job description require them to be there? And is that still justifiable in the, given the evidence we've had over the last 2 years, that works. Pam said, can you really work for an organization and never have been on the premises? Think Productive doesn't have a physical office. We're only a small organization, and we were making it work beforehand. I think we've got even better at it over the last 2 years. Again, I am not an HR person. I am not in charge of an organization, but I do spend a lot of time talking to people about their real world experience of hybrid, whether they are individuals in an organization, whether they are the senior leadership. And the fact that 200 of you turned up to spend 45 minutes talking about this, and over 100 of you have stayed for an extra 15 minutes of overrun, kind of shows how important this conversation is to absolutely all of us, whatever we are doing and whatever we're involved in. Grace, I have 2 more minutes. Give me one final thing, and then we're going to wrap up.
How do you recommend young professionals navigate the hybrid work, especially with the importance of socializing and networking?
Yes. Okay. This is a really interesting one. So, I remember being an early career builder, and it was chatting to people in the office and making the connections and stuff like that. I think there's 2 ways of doing it. First of all, if you're that person, you need to find other ways of getting that stuff done. So, maybe get your LinkedIn account going and vibrant earlier on in your career than you might have otherwise. Deliberately and consciously connect to people, even within your own organization, to start building your network. Ask whether or not you can sit in on other meetings and observe, what are the opportunities for learning. One of the great things that has happened to the L&D market over the last couple of years is learning is a lot more accessible. The fact that you can just take an hour out of your afternoon and come and do something like this, and you didn't have to move seat, you will have a lot more available to you as an individual. And then my other point is that if you're the person who's in charge of graduate recruitment, early career development, talent stream, whatever it is, induction, you have work to do about making sure that things that may maybe have happened for that population a little bit more automatically can still happen, even in the hybrid environment as well. And you've got more tools in your kit bag to do that, that you can put up little peer conferences, peer town halls, coffee times. You can invite guest speakers much more easily than you used to. All sorts of stuff is available as well.
Yeah, actually, I was running a session of a hybrid working session for in person for a team last week, and somebody said that they found that actually with the hybrid work with virtual meetings, they felt like they were able to get to know some of the senior people more easily because they don't have to find their way through to the corner office, and it looks really it's I can just see them on the screen, and I can see them with their kids in the background and things like that.
And they're just humans like the rest of us, and they have the same challenges, and their internet drops out for 90 seconds in the middle of a presentation as well, and it's okay, because we're just humans and we're just doing the best we can and having fun along the way as well. Fantastic. Thank you so much for being my ride along, Grace. I'm so sorry I couldn't pay full attention to the chat today. But I've got a 12-year-old who's going to be knocking on the door in 10 minutes time. So I want to have a breathe and a cup of tea. And this recording will go on YouTube. And if you've watched the YouTube and you've got to the end, then thank you for joining us as well. And head to the website and look out for the new ones that we'll be doing over the next couple of months as well. And those of you who are regulars, it was lovely to have you back. And those of you who are here for the first time, maybe we'll meet again in a little while. Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone, and good afternoon.
Take care.